pandemic got us into a reflective space and made us look inward to see what we can do for the world at large. As a self-expression coach, I became a catalyst for women and started Vani, a one-on-one coaching program for women on finding their voice, to speak up, to be visible. As a storyteller, I spotted there were many ordinary people amongst us leading extraordinary lives, making a difference to the world, and they needed to be heard. Thus was born You and I with Rashmi Shetty, where amazing personal journeys with their uniqueness and individuality are showcased, a reaffirmation of the fact: open your eyes wider. The world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. World Environment Day is celebrated on June 5th globally every year. In keeping with that theme, our guest today is a perfect fit for this special. Rituraj Phukan is an environmental writer, TEDx speaker, adventurer, and naturalist based out of Assam. He is the founder of the Indigenous Peoples Climate Justice Forum and also serves as the national coordinator for biodiversity for the Climate Reality Project in India. He is a member of the International Union for Conservation of Nature and sits on the board of civil society groups in America, Europe, and Australia. Rituraj has personally experienced the impacts of climate change in the polar frontiers of the Arctic and the Antarctic, in the Himalayas, and across India. Having worked extensively at the grassroots, he says water is the local issue of global climate change for people and for biodiversity. Rituraj was personally trained as a climate reality leader by Nobel laureate Al Gore and was featured in the former US Vice President's 2017 book, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. He authored the chapter Biodiversity in a Warming World in the Amazon #1 bestseller Climate Abandoned, a book launched in the USA on Earth Day 2019. He was an accredited observer at the UN Climate Conference COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021 and has recently been selected as a European Climate Pact ambassador. Listen in as Rituraj shares his amazing journey, experiences, and how each one of us can make a difference. Hi, Rituraj. Having met you in a conference and having this conversation for this podcast seems surreal for me. Thank you so much for being on You and I with Rashmi Shetty, a climate change activist, very relevant for today's conversations. It's really an honor to have you on this podcast. I'm really curious to know what little Rituraj was all about to the Rituraj Phukan that the world knows today. So, can you take us on your journey?
Oh, thank you, first of all, for having me here. Well, I was born here in Assam, and after several years of living in different places around the country, I'm back in Assam now. So, uh, uh, as you'd imagine, I grew up, surrounded by nature. And the Brahmaputra Valley, where we live, is verdant and lush, with a lot of wildlife. And of course, my first memories are of the birds and all the vegetation that we used to see during the weekends. We used to go to this forest areas, the jungles, to the riverside. Uh, I guess that is when I fell in love with the natural world. Uh, and then, of course, those memories were disrupted by the start of the uh, Assam movement, which was basically a student-led movement against people uh, who were perceived to have, infiltrated into the state, and in those days. And then there was a lot of turmoil, almost like civil war like situation, and we lost school days. Almost 2 years of school days were lost during that time. Uh, and I used to definitely wonder why people would want to leave their own countries, or where they're born, and come to uh, cause trouble in other lands. Of course, those were very young days. I was naive, and didn't know what was happening. And then I went along to study outside. So boarding school was inevitable almost those days, because my father was active in politics as well. So we had a lot of tensions and conflicts. So I studied around the country, from Dehradun to Chennai, and then Pune, and and then I got into a job in the government. But the nature's calling was too strong. So at a certain point of time, I decided to quit my job, and then I you know uh, came here, started working, reliving my you know love for nature. Started with conservation of birds. The Great Red Chiton was one of the first projects that I got involved in with Green Guard Nature Organization, which is you know uh, a conservation organization based out of Nagaon, where I live. And then we got into facilitating coexistence with elephants. And then in the year 2000, I guess 9, I first watched An Inconvenient Truth, which actually opened my eyes to uh, climate change. But it remained in the back of my mind. Uh, but all of the things that the more I read about climate change, I was hearing about the floods that would happen. There would be conflicts. There would be people who were displaced. Uh, all these things somehow in the back of my mind uh, raised the big question whether uh, all the so-called burning issues that we are seeing in Assam, uh, with floods increasing in intensity year after year, erosion, uh, people being displaced both internally as well as the historical conflict I grew up with, um, with the people from neighboring countries migrating to Assam and the rest of the country. So this question of whether we were a early climate impacted region remained at the back of my mind. Then in 2012, I went for this. I got selected for this expedition, and in 2013, actually, I went to Antarctica. Uh, and one of the most memorable uh, days out there was in a place called the Antarctic Sound. And early morning, in the bitterly, bone-chilling cold, we are summoned up to the deck, and barely about 10 to 15 people out of the 80 who were on the expedition braved the chill. And what we saw was these huge tabular icebergs. And Robert Swan, the first man to have walked to both the poles, he pointed out that these were the remains of the Larsen B ice shelf, which had collapsed about 11 years earlier in 2002, when not many people believed in climate change. And suddenly it dawned to me that, what is happening, the threat of sea level rise from the collapse of ice sheets, which were protected by ice shelves such as the Larsen B and C and A and all of the others, uh, would be devastating, especially for low-lying countries like Bangladesh, and then would aggravate the problem of uh, people being displaced. And it dawned to me that all those migrants to my region may have been the early climate refugees, because the more I read up, I learned about sea level rise, about salinization, uh, and in fact, during that trip itself, a few days later, I think the next day maybe, I got an email to be part of the Pacific Warriors Day of Action, which was one of the earliest climate protests those days, where 15 nations which will be inundated before the rest of the world by rising sea levels. They had this huge demonstration globally, organized by 350.org, and my first act of climate activism was to hold up a solidarity banner from Antarctica. So that is how I became a climate activist. Yeah, so that is basically the journey in brief. And then, of course, a month or two later, when I returned back, I went to Turkey to get trained as a climate reality leader. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Al Gore himself, who actually was behind An Inconvenient Truth, and he won the Nobel Prize for that.
Right.
And then I also met a lot of climate scientists and became part of this fantastic movement with so many thousands of climate leaders around the world. So now we work together basically.
Yeah. It was a cause that at that time in India, not many were talking about. And when you got drawn into this expedition with Antarctica, when you saw those ice shelves, like you said, and you were part of all of it, and you came back and spoke about it, did the people around you respond as in, it's still not close, we still have a long time, we are safer? Or was the response of immediate action? What was it that you see as a difference then to conversations that are happening now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think those days, I remember that speaking about climate change was quite really hard because people did not associate, and these were looked at as problems, far away.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that in those days, many people were just talking about polar bears and melting glaciers, which would not really touch a chord with the people. I realized that very soon, so I started in a different way. So I had two issues that I found to be very useful in connecting people. So if I was talking to students at any level, whether it was primary, middle school, or high school, or even college students, um, I would focus on biodiversity and then build up the conversation towards climate. So everybody has a favorite animal or more than that, um, a bird, or people who talk about tigers or elephants, and all of these are affected by the climate crisis. Um, that is one approach I took, and the other one was the water, because water is an universal issue, and it really helped that uh, it was around the time when the drought started across the country, especially I think in 2016, 17, that was the years which saw the worst droughts in many parts of the country. And one of the years, maybe it was 2018, I think the Niti Aayog said that we are suffering from the worst ever crisis in history. Uh, so water became an issue that could connect even people who'd otherwise be um, unaffected by any talk about the climate crisis. So to reach out to media, to political parties or politicians, to corporates, water was a uh, road that
Yeah.
made it possible to speak to them. So it was biodiversity and water, and in fact I developed some of my presentations around these, and then I started connecting with people. uh, so yeah, that approach helped.
Okay, so with children and students, it was biodiversity, and with adults and decision makers, it was more around water that you worked around. Okay, so was this your training that gave you that, or basic common sense of talking to different groups. How did you test the waters before you found your approach to be heard?
Yeah, yeah. I also lead, this group called Walk for Water, which is based out of Hyderabad. So, along with the founder, Mr. Karunakar Reddy, we designed a a campaign where we wanted to bring focus on World Water Day and make it as significant as World Environment Day and Earth Day, uh, particularly because almost many parts of India was either suffering from uh, the water crisis in terms either scarcity or too much of water, right? Like floods. So almost I always say that water is the local issue of climate change for people and for biodiversity. Uh, of course, in some areas it is water scarcity. In some areas it is currently water abundance. We have too much of rains and floods, but the projections again are different. So we started out, we had a collaboration with NSS, NCC, the Indian Army in some states, a lot of governments. In fact, in Bangalore, World Water Day in 2017 was organized where the then Chief Minister himself participated.
Yes.
And in Delhi, we had the union ministers participating, and all over the country, we had observances in almost every district. So that was a huge campaign. Um, and then I myself travel around the country, to some of the worst water affected areas. So saw myself what was happening. So that uh, knowledge and experience helped me in talking about the water crisis. And of course, regarding biodiversity, I have been a conservationist first and foremost. So, having worked with birds, with elephants, and then also been part of the Kids for Tigers program, which is a Sanctuary Asia initiative. And this was started by Mr. Bittu Sehgal, I think, in the year 2002. So this has been 20 years, and this was a pioneering program which actually connected food security, water security with biodiversity and conservation. And people, we were talking about the climate crisis, back then. So all this really helped, all these experiences. So yeah, so learning from the grassroots and then bringing these into the presentations. Besides, we had this huge updated, scientifically validated resources available for free uh, once you become a climate reality leader. So yeah, that also helps.
Okay, so are these available for general public also to read and update their knowledge? Is it
Yeah,
on some public website which anyone can go and visit and read up?
yes, the Climate Reality Project website is pretty handy, and these trainings are also for free, so anybody can get trained. In fact, the pandemic made it possible to have virtual trainings actually. So we were able to train tens of thousands of new climate reality leaders. In the past, we'd only have in-person trainings, which would be like 2 or 3 times a year in different cities around the world. Although the training was free, you still have to go and travel and bear the cost of accommodation. But during the pandemic, because we switched to virtual trainings, we could uh, train lots more people. Um, so now this year we are back to in-person training. The next one is within the next few weeks. It's going to be organized in Las Vegas. Uh, but we are coming back with more virtual training soon. So anybody who wants to be part of the organization can, take this training. It's when it happens virtually, it's spread out over a week. So you can choose weekdays or the weekends, and
Okay.
you also have the choice of uh, completing some of the things at your own pace.
Hmm.
You besides attending the live session. So yeah, it's very useful.
Yeah, it truly is because I come from Bangalore city and a city which was once called the city of gardens. And today we hardly have the green cover. In the name of progress, in the name of IT, most of the tree cover has been cut off to accommodate progress. And you come from a place that even now has a lot of floods. So, in cities like this, where nature was abundant and very generous, when man interfered so much, what do you see, Rituraj, as the biggest change that needs to come into the culture of the city in order to make sure that every citizen of that particular city at least contributes their bit?
I think another positivity that came out of the pandemic is that people started appreciating nature more. I guess with so much of news coming in about how biodiversity was recovering when things were on hold, how the mountains got visible uh, because of uh, less pollution
Pollution.
and all. Yeah, and all that thing. uh, that appreciation of nature could definitely help a lot of conservation measures. And I think each and every person should be aware of their impact on nature. We are a consumer driven society, so um, if we make consumer decisions based on the impact of our choices, I think that will really help. Just for example, what we eat has a huge impact. So consuming something that is produced locally rather than something which is uh, produced in a different place and then processed, packaged, transported, and brought to your city to make it available either at your doorstep or at an outlet has a much more carbon footprint. So that particular footprint is very critical. Similarly, almost everything, a T-shirt also has a value. To understand the value, the footprint of each and every thing that we use, whether it's clothing or food or transportation, would definitely help us make more informed choices. And some of these choices are very easy to to switch over to. For example, uh, to limiting the air conditioner at say 24 degrees rather than 18, and then keeping a blanket over yourself is something that everybody could do. And each and everybody across the country, if we are able to make these choices, it will definitely help. uh, and especially in the urban areas, I think one thing that uh, the government should definitely encourage actively is you know uh, rooftop solar, and then we could also practice rooftop gardening and rainwater harvesting. So we have so much terraces available which probably are not being utilized, and this revolution, a combination of rainwater harvesting, solar panels, which would also not only generate electricity but would also enhance the albedo by reflectivity. uh, all of this, and then the rooftop garden. I think all of these could definitely help alleviate the urban heat island effect. Uh, Another thing probably the governments could do is to restore the wetlands, and it would add to the beautification of the city as well, and plant lots of trees, of course. These are critical. I think many people are already doing that, but definitely it's not enough. uh, I think just last week I saw this map about how
Where?
bad the urban heat island effect is in
Yeah,
India.
India.
Uh,
India.
yeah, so I think that needs to be focused now. How to change that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that map went viral. It was there on all social media platforms on how bad the situation in India is this summer.
Yeah.
And talking about rooftop gardens and solar paneling on the rooftops and making maximum use of the energy that nature is giving us, the one area that each of us can make a difference is in the way we have sustainable lifestyles. So, when we talk about sustainability, each one of us can make a difference. So, I would want to know here at this point your definition of what sustainability is at an individual level before the ripple is felt in the society and then on.
Well, I think, sustainability, uh, as a word has become popular now, and then with the sustainable development goals, uh, everybody is talking about them.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you look at sustainability for me, uh, I would not look further than the communities, the indigenous communities, the local people uh, who used to be and still are in most parts very sustainable in their own world, in their own community. Indigenous people and local communities would live off the land. They produce, they grew most of the food and vegetables, uh, and had a very minimal impact on the uh, environment. Um, Many of these communities still sustain themselves from the soil. Uh, they have a vegetable garden, they have a pond, and a poultry and other livestock. So almost everything that they require in terms of food is produced in their own village. Many people still exchange the vegetables they grow. Besides that, there is little or no wastage at all. They do not really consume a lot of packaged foods. So even bread or biscuits. So there is hardly any single-use plastic. Uh, I know this sounds incredible, but there are still communities which exist. In fact, if I go back to say 15 years in Assam, uh, most villages used to have a bakery where the bread, biscuits, and cakes were produced, and one cycle cart would go for home delivery every evening. Now that has disappeared, and most of these bakeries are closed down. That was sustainable, and what is happening now, because everybody is buying centrally from the shops, from the grocery store, and all that single-use plastic that is used for the bread and biscuits uh, are been littered all over, and almost every village has this huge garbage dumps now, which were not there earlier. Even all the picnic places, roadsides, drains, all are clogged with all this big plastic menace. This is not sustainable. So what I define as sustainable would definitely be, the vision that I still have of these villages, these communities 20 years back when, you know, uh, most of them were very, very sustainable. There was hardly any wastage.
Okay, because one thing is very clear. We are at the top of the animal kingdom, but we are the ones who are spoiling the entire balance of nature. No wild animal has ever taken over like the way we have. And like you said some time back, the pandemic definitely showed us who is the boss and how nature can take care of herself if left to herself. And here at this point, you mentioned the indigenous community. You've traveled all over our country, and how many of these communities still exist the way they originally were, and how many of them, in the sense, can you see a lot of them around us from whom we can learn how to live a life coexisting with nature rather than trying to be the one who takes over? Are spaces for indigenous communities available now, or have they become part of the other society that exists in the name of progress?
Well, India has 700 indigenous communities,
Hmm.
and I have seen that indigenous people are very proud of their cultural heritage.
Yeah.
They try to protect their customs and traditions very devotedly. Uh, the heritage of indigenous cultures is still very vibrant across the country. And just for example, the northeast of India, now that there is so much of focus on you know indigenous cultures, people are celebrating indigenous festivals, clothes, food, uh, and there is a massive revival of uh, food, in fact, indigenous food and traditions. So thankfully, we still have lots and lots of communities, especially when you are talking about culture and traditions. These are very much alive. Of course, there have been changes in lifestyles and living standards. A lot of, like I was saying, a lot of wastage, consumerism has creeped in as well. Uh, there are within indigenous people, there are people who have, who are very rich, and I think there have been changes. But people who are, I'm talking about the vast majority, 90% of indigenous communities, I think they are very much rooted to the ground and rooted to their cultural traditions and heritage, as well as the habits. So they may have a meal in a restaurant every, once in a while when they are traveling, but what they would uh, define as food is what is probably, what they grow and what they cook at home, right? Um and what the place they would call home is still where they grow their food. So I think the indigenous people and local communities are very much critical to preserving biodiversity, uh, and as well as developing this resilience again, to meet the changes that are coming because of climate change, and also roll back biodiversity loss. So science has already proved that the indigenous people and local communities are critical to this planetary crisis.
Yeah. So, is there any way that we can get them to be the ones who lead us because they are the ones closest to nature and know how best to handle the crisis of nature? So, are they part of the communities trying to build in the awareness around the country, or are people listening to them? Because their voice needs to be heard at this point to understand how nature works.
Uh, well, I think there are a lot of indigenous groups and um, voices, climate activists around the world. And at COP26 last year, 28 representatives of indigenous people and communities from around the world, from all the seven constituencies recognized by the United Nations, uh, were made a party to the negotiations. But of course, they have been a part of negotiations in the past, but now, they are critically a part of the solutions that are being talked about. However, that is not enough. Like I said, we have about 700 communities in India itself, and you cannot just suppose one set of knowledge on another people. Each of these communities have grown up uh, in their particular areas, whether they are coastal communities or riparian or mountain communities. They have their own traditions, which are basically intertwined with the biodiversity around them. uh, to the land, to the you know the waters, the lakes or rivers or seas that surround where they live. Uh, so we need to have these set of values from each of these, say, 700 communities in India, uh, to be documented, revived, and scaled up to develop resilience. Um, so what may work for a community in Kerala may not work for a community in Assam, or what may work for a community that lives by the river may not work for a community that lives in the mountains. So sustainability would mean uh, getting them uh, to continue, you know, practicing these same traditions, having the same food and drinks that they have grown up with, uh, and conserving the biodiversity around them, which is basically intertwined, connected with their heritage itself. Uh, and then these community-led, nature-based solutions could be the answer. So how do we do that? That is critical because we need to have representatives from each of these communities to be successful. Maybe they can share best practices. Obviously, the way the world has moved, it took 21 years, 21 COPs to get to the Paris Agreement, and then another 6 years have passed by. Uh, we are celebrating 50 years of the Stockholm Summit in 1972. But definitely awareness of the environment has only remained, uh, in conversations, not practical. In the 50 years, probably we have destroyed more of nature than at any other period of time in the past. So involving these communities hands-on in the solutions, actively uh, restoring livelihoods and lifestyles is critical, I guess.
You have traveled worldwide, you've traveled all over our country as well. So, are there role models that you have or people who inspire you and give you hope that, yes, we can tide over this crisis also? Because they say climate change is real, temperatures are increasing, ocean levels are going up, and cities which are in the coastal areas are hugely threatened. So this is the time for action because I think, like you said, 50 years, we've spoken enough. Now is action. So who are some of those people and what are their stories that continues to give you hope that at an individual level, you can work and take it to the societal level?
First of all, I would definitely name Mr. Jadab Payang, who is the forest man of India. He is from Assam. Now the world is talking about restoration. Last year, the United Nations uh, Decade for Ecosystem Restoration was launched on World Environment Day. Uh, and last year was also the first year when we celebrated the first rewilding day. So restoration, rewilding, all these are now in focus. But what Mr. Jadapayang did for over 40 years, and 30 of those years were without anybody knowing what he was doing. And people who knew that used to call him basically mad, right? Uh, and if we talk about what one man can do, even then, the power of one, he exemplifies, I think, what is possible. He exemplifies hope. Uh, I think he should be the role model for rewilding, for restoration, and for what needs to be and what can be done. Secondly, I would definitely not take names, but as a whole, the young people who have been at the front of the environmental movement, and it is not just now, and I'm not only talking about uh, people who are you know very very actively leading the climate movement, but even in in the 1970s and 80s, people who started this environmental movement were youth actually. Uh, in 1992 at the Earth Summit, it was 12-year-old Savern Kali Suzuki who spoke to world leaders along with her, fellow uh, teens, uh, and they made that video is still available on the YouTube, and I think everybody should listen to that. Uh, she made the people stop and really wonder about the route of progress that we are taking. Uh, then I remember Felix Finkbeiner, who was just 9 years old when he started Plant for the Planet with a target of planting 1 million trees. I think by the time he was like 12 or 13 years old, there were over 100 million trees planted by his organization uh, all over the world. They have a branch in I think every country. Um, our own, youngsters have also done a lot of good. Ridhima Pandey, she had filed a case against the government of India when she was, I think, 9 or 10 years old uh, for climate inaction. All of these, of course, uh, efforts were multiplied with the emergence of Greta Thunberg later. Um, and the amount of climate awareness, the amount of um, determination that we are seeing in young people uh, to make a difference is incredible. And to think that these youngsters will be in positions of authority, decision making in different fields in just a few years' time really gives me the greatest hope. Uh, Across Europe, many youngsters would refuse to travel by flight uh, because of the emissions associated with air travel. That is the kind of determination. I think everybody knows that even Greta, she went by uh, a yacht when she traveled to America a few years back. Uh, and the proliferation of, you know, uh, plant-based food uh, and eateries across Europe and the Americas and even India now is really fabulous because more and more young people are deciding not to uh, eat food that has an impact on the climate, on the environment, and on animals as a whole. So these are really uh, great uh, efforts happening, and the young people are at the forefront of these efforts actually.
Wow, it's really nice to hear that because on the one side, people talk about no hope, and here you're talking, being in that space of climate change as an activist of hope because of the youngsters. And coming to this generation of youngsters that we have around us, which believes in instant gratification. What do you have to say about their attitude towards climate change, nature, their lives, and what kind of a generation are you addressing, Rituraj? I'm very curious to know because on the one side, everyone's telling that this is a very self centered generation, which is constantly only about themselves, lost on their mobile phones, and not worried about true relationships. Who have you met, and what do you have to say about the generation you're speaking to?
Well, I think there is, you are right about that. I think there is a divide, definitely a large divide between those who are informed and those who choose not to be informed. Um, See, the information is there, so it's there on the internet. It's everybody is connected, so people, uh, some people would watch only uh, reels and clips that gives you the instant gratification that you talk about, whereas there are others who would actually um, watch YouTube videos or talks or TEDx, events focused on the environmental crisis and the solutions. Now, this divide between the informed and those who choose to be negligent is immense. Uh, However, I guess it takes a very small time to make the switch. I guess uh, it is something like each one teach one. If somebody is made to watch for a minute, I guess we could see them change very quickly. Therefore, trainings and events and all kind of media interactions, podcasts, that the one we are doing now, these are so important, because even if we are able to change one person, we are multiplying our impact. We are actually not trying to teach anybody, tell anybody what to do, but we are just communicating the science, the reality, the dangers that await us because of inaction. So that small switch could act as a catalyst for innovation. And we're seeing a lot of innovation coming up. If you look at the startups, there are so many startups in the green sector who are concerned about how to make things better, how to change this consumerism into more sustainable, lesser emissions. Even the travel sector is coming around to net zero travel, or carbon neutral travel. So all these innovations in the startup sector, they are coming from these youngsters from the side which are informed. And I think by doing things, they are also converting a lot of people. So this is climate action that we are seeing happening around us. I think at certain point of time, each and everybody will be forced by the circumstances that we are facing, the times that we are living in, to be better citizens.
True, because many people believe that the pandemic was just the beginning of a lot of things to come, in which our lifestyles are going to change. And talking about the pandemic, a lot of us went into a reflective space because we were forced to, not that we wanted to. And suddenly life came to a standstill and it told us what is important and what is not, what is our luxuries and what are our needs, what are our wants and what are our desires. It gave us a lot of reflection to all these spaces for everyone, immaterial of the city they were in and the age group they are in. For you, Rituraj, who's been in climate change for quite some time now, much before the pandemic, how did the pandemic change any of your thought processes? And what did it do to you?
Well, I don't know. Maybe because people had so much of time during the lockdown, I think, and because the media was focusing so much about nature, nature's revenge, and how uh, zoonotic diseases are um, have increased in the past few decades and are likely to proliferate in the future. The threat of viruses and all that, but I think people really made the connection to nature. A lot of people, of course, there were us who were already quite connected, but I think a majority of people who were oblivious to the changes or the impacts that their actions have on nature started to think twice, started to understand, a lot of things. And I found it very easy to actually convey that climate change and the threat of viruses are interconnected. So when I tell people that the melting permafrost could be the source of the next pandemic, I think they do understand. If given a choice, I believe most people would definitely be willing to even pay more, possibly for renewable energy sources, uh, and possibly sustainable choices as well. However, I think a lot of gains from that period have been lost with the outbreak of war, and the continued destruction of forests, and uh, contrary to the global commitments, the continued insistence on expanding extractive industries is something that probably is confusing a lot of people as well.
True. And the revenge travel this summer vacation for a lot of people, they're calling it revenge travel because they are kind of making up for the lost 2 years of vacations that they missed. Is also somewhere making, at least I'm thinking, are all the lessons at a loss now? Are people seriously going back to what they were doing and what they faced has been completely forgotten? And as we are coming to the conclusion of this conversation, Rituraj, what would be 3 life lessons that you'd like to leave us with?
Uh, One is, of course, I think hope. Uh, it is very important to think positive and think of a better future. Each one of us must find our own inspiration. It might be in a parent, it might be in a neighbor, it might be somebody in the community or somebody anywhere in the world, in a connected world. But there are people who gives us reason for hope. So to have that hope and uh, get inspired is something that I always like to share. Um, Secondly, I think each one of us also must recognize our own potential to make a change. No one is too small. Uh, and we know there are things that are unavoidable. I need to go to some place. I will drive my car, which consumes fossil fuel, which adds to the emissions. I need to go somewhere. I have to take a flight, and that critically, adds to emissions as well. But is there something we can do every day that actually uh, kind of offsets some of this emission? Fortunately, there are. What we eat, uh, or what we wear, or where we eat, all of this has a great impact, way more than what we like to believe. So to understand really how much of an impact one can make personally, we should spend a bit of time on calculating the comparative emissions of our own choices, our own lifestyle choices, and try to make uh, the lesser emissions, choose the lesser evil. And lastly, I would just probably repeat, each one, teach one. I think uh, don't try to change the world. Uh, Ultimately, you might end up doing that if you just, can get somebody to listen to the science, to listen to the reality of what is happening. If one of your listeners actually come around to take the climate reality training, I guess I have accomplished a lot, because his potential may be to influence a lot of more people as well. Uh, so this impact, this tropic cascades of impact can be really, really life changing. It can be world changing as well. I think that is something that we all need to realize at some point of time. Social media can be used, if somebody is not comfortable doing a one-to-one conversation. And so everybody has these resources. Uh, so let's uh, make it a better world.
Amen to your wish. And like Carl Sagan had said, preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. And I think the more we understand the value of this quote, the more we'll value who we are blessed with and what we are living on. Because I think the day we cherish and respect the earth has been always so generous and giving to us. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, Ruturaj. a pleasure and honor hosting you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. I wish you all the very best. And like you said, even if one person who's heard this comes into your training, and I'm signing up next, that you can be assured. When the next virtual one is on, I'll sign up for that because I feel these conversations are very important. The more the merrier, the more awareness, the better for our life. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you, and best wishes to all.
With that, we come to the end of this weekly quest of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know people who make the world beautiful. Write in to rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. Come, let's explore this amazing world together, both you and I.